What do you think?
I think we're dead meat. Real dead meat.
You dead meat!
Go ahead and laugh, you guys. If I ever find little bastards that did this, they're dead meat.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What's Your Favorite Scary Movie, where I talk to people about their favorite scary movies. And today I'm going to be talking to my good friend MatPat. Hey buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad that you could join us.
You are literally the first human contact that I've had in weeks, so it's good to see another human face.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I can't compare to Stephanie or Oliver, but hopefully I'm a close third, maybe?
Yeah, I guess there's them too.
Yeah, yeah.
Excuse me?
I asked you what your favorite horror movie was, and you gave me a few options, but the one that was most appealing to me to talk about was the Blair Witch Project from 1999.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm excited that you picked it because I ran through the list of movies on your channel, and you've never talked about Blair Witch, have you?
No, never. I did a Patreon review of it, but that's not for the public, so this is the first time for free that I'll be discussing this movie.
Maybe that was my excuse this whole time. As a non-patron to your channel, I needed to get you to talk about it in some other format so I could actually hear your thoughts on the movie.
Well, yeah, good work, man. You cracked the code.
Yeah, probably would have been easier to pay you a couple bucks, huh?
So yeah, this movie, I mean, we're about the same age, and so when this movie came out, we were still kids. I'm curious if you also bought into the hype when this movie came out and how it was marketed as a real thing, that these actors weren't actors, that they were real people who disappeared.
Absolutely. It was so mind-blowing to hear all the hoopla that was going around this thing, and the idea that the actors disappeared and that their IMDb pages were wiped clean or like said that they were deceased. There were so many cool viral marketing things that they really did to make this as immersive as possible. And this was before the internet had really gotten into the forefront, so researching this stuff and fact-checking it was almost impossible.
And what's your take on the Blair Witch at this point? Do you think she exists?
No.
Chelsea and I discussed this on the podcast in our episode of movies that changed the horror genre, and partially it was because of the whole found footage thing. Obviously, it was the first found footage movie in a long time and definitely the first to be this much of a success. But Chelsea focused on like the viral marketing, which nowadays is a common thing, but back then nobody knew what was going on. And like you said, the internet was still kind of new. It was still kind of just nerds and weirdos on it. So to actually like go on there and investigate what the hell was going on with this Blair Witch thing, that was something totally different.
Are you saying that Cannibal Holocaust was not the thing that kicked off the found footage resurgence?
That wasn't quite as popular as this movie, although maybe just as divisive.
It's true, honestly. Like that's the other great thing about this movie is people didn't know what to make of it, which is incredible, right? Like you get to the end of this movie and you don't know whether you love it or hate it for a lot of audience members. I personally really love it for that reason. We as audience members and as viewers get kind of complacent. There's a certain comfort in the way a story is told, right? You're introduced to your protagonist, they go through challenges, there's an arc, and you know, whether it's good or bad ending, like it comes to some sort of conclusion. And the great thing about Blair Witch is that in a lot of ways it breaks a lot of storytelling conventions that we as audience members are used to. It is a very organic story, it takes its time, there aren't big jump scares or reveals in it, you don't know what to expect. And it's that sort of uncertainty and that sort of storytelling that to me is the most exciting and scariest part of this film.
Before we start talking about specifics about it, I just want to know, have you always loved this movie, or when you first saw it, was there a part of you that was like, oh, what was this all about? I'm not a fan.
So, true story, actually. I didn't see it till I was much, much older. And I watched it because I felt like I had to. As someone who studies movies, as someone who wants to know kind of like these pivotal films, I owe it to myself to watch this so I can speak knowledgeably about it. I didn't expect to like it, but I watched it and it lived up to the hype for me, and I walked away with it instantly being like one of the most unsettling theater experiences that I had had, and one of the most positive horror movie experiences that I had.
Oh, did you get to see it in a theater for your first time?
Yeah, actually it was like a Halloween showing of it.
Oh, that's very fortunate, because one of the cool things about this movie is the sound design, all the noises in the woods. I think this movie really nails down how scary the woods can be when you're deep in there and you don't know which direction is the way to get out.
It's all around us.
That is fucking weird.
It's so true, and I think it's one of those things that, like, you don't really think about it, but if you go in the wrong direction, you're just lost forever. And how do you get out at that point? Just that alone, getting lost in the forest, is in and of itself terrifying, because yeah, what do you do at that point? And especially once you start running low on food, once tensions start to get high. God, share your grace on me! You're already in this really life or death scenario, let alone any supernatural things that might be happening elsewhere in the woods.
Being Lost in the Woods is a horror movie on its own. And then, yeah, like you said, I love the line that Heather is talking to Mike. It's like one of the first couple of nights after they've heard noises outside their tent, and they're assuming it's people messing with them. And Mike's like, I don't want to deal with that. And she's like, well, what if it's not human? And he's just like, well, I don't want to deal with that either.
Right?
If I heard a cackling, I would have shit in my pants.
That line from Mike really has always stood out to me, and rewatching this last night, I was surprised at how many lines from this movie have just kind of nestled themselves into my brain. They're mostly innocuous, but like when Josh is screaming at Heather about what her motivation is.
We ended up in the same place. There's no one here to help you. That's your motivation.
It's surprising because I know that a lot of the dialogue, if not all of it, was improvised among these kind of non-actor, actual film students.
I think that's one of the other things that I love about the movie. So much of it was improvised, and yet it feels like there's not a lot of fat there. I have a problem with a lot of improvised movies in general because I think, you know, they're kind of bloated. It takes a while to get to the point. There's a lot of extraneous stuff that's mixed in if they're not edited well. But those three actors and the production team did such a solid job of kind of guiding them through this improv experiment, right? That it feels like all the scenes have intention. It feels like everything is scripted well enough that like they feel like real actual lines and they're not meandering in kind of what their objectives are. But at the same time, because it's improvised, it feels so organic and realistic. You have everyone handling this trauma of being lost in the woods and potentially being haunted in their own personal ways, right? You have Heather who's trying to hold on to control for dear life and saying like, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and finding safety behind her camera. So much so that the other characters even call her out on it.
Don't fuck it and turn the goddamn thing off.
But then you have Josh who's just kind of laughing the whole thing off and trying to go with the flow. And then Mike who is just basket case freaking out the entire time and just loses his mind.
Poor Mike, man.
I know, right?
Help us!
This is not the way to get out of here.
Fuck! Fuck!
Also, I don't know how deep into the lore of this you got, but like neither Josh nor Mike in the lore of the movie got paid to do the production at all. And whereas Josh had a past relationship with Heather, Mike is just some sound guy that they brought in for the production. So like not only is he not getting paid, but you know, getting possessed in the process, he just got like shafted all across the board.
I mean, student filmmakers, man, he got some beer out of it that night in the motel, so.
A hotel, some free cigarettes, and a beer.
Yeah.
Very good first day.
The movie was very divisive. A lot of audience members did not like it. And I think one of the chief complaints about it, besides the shaky camera, is that the characters are annoying and that they're not enjoyable to watch. Do you feel that at all?
I think they're believable characters, is the thing. Like, yeah, they're obnoxious, but I think they're obnoxious when the times get tough, right? At the very beginning of the film, like you said, they're student filmmakers. And so Heather has that sort of pretentiousness of like, let me make my film black and white, and you know, let me read from the book over the cemetery while we do slow panning. So like, I know those people, right? I know the people who make those movies.
I was those people.
Right, that's exactly it. So I get it. You know, I get that these are people who see themselves as great artists who are out there just excited to do a project, and when the going gets tough, just have no recourse and have no idea what to do. I think they're reacting in a way that's so believable to how any normal person would react. We're lost in the woods, we're running out of food, we don't have a map, and there's something hunting us in the woods. Yeah, I'm gonna freak out, and yeah, I'm gonna cry ugly tears with snot dripping down my nose and just yell at my fellow filmmakers out there because that's all I got at that point. And I'm gonna be mad at them, I'm gonna be scared, and I need somewhere to vent my feelings, and they're the only thing in front of me.
You are a fucking asshole!
I'm sorry.
You're a fucking asshole! And if
The map wasn't doing shit all day.
we get hurt or if we die out here, it's your fucking fault!
I agree. I think the performances come off so believable. And I think a testament to that is the fact that so many people back then believed that it was actual found footage.
Yeah.
How can you have better acting than that, than the fact that people believed that these were real people just caught on camera and lost in the woods?
Right? I think that's one of the things that a lot of found footage movies lose, is you watch them, but you don't really get the sense that it was actual found footage. And you know, watching my fair share of found footage movies, very few of them have convinced me that this is a real story. Paranormal Activity, actually, I think is one of the other ones where it found the right balance of being just found footagey enough to be believable, you know, but very few are able to thread that needle of using that genre of filmmaking to its best effect.
Yeah, since this is your favorite, or at least one of your favorite horror movies, do you find that you also like other found footage movies? Like, did this spur a love of that subgenre for you?
When it's done well, and like I said, like, I think it's hard for movies to do it well. I think a lot of people just use it as a gimmick because it's been used successfully in other ones without understanding, you know, that it's not just a shaky camera that makes something work as found footage. It is that believable characterization that feels organic and improvised. It is that edit that feels a little bit more bloated or has a little bit more excess to it without letting it expand too far from the story that you're trying to tell.
You mentioned the shaky camera, and that was a huge criticism of it, was that people were getting motion sickness and everything, but that's never been the case with me, and I'm wondering if it was with you, because I think for me, the reason why I was able to watch this movie and not have any adverse reaction to it is because I've always been making my own videos and my own movies with camcorders, so I've seen this kind of footage, and I wonder if in the age of YouTube where everyone has a camera phone and is making their own videos, if that criticism doesn't hold up as much.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I will say, like, seeing it in the theater and then also rewatching it on smaller screens, it is easier to watch on a smaller screen. When it's big screen, it is harder to watch, certainly. And I could definitely see how people who are more sensitive to that sort of thing might be kind of like feeling ill or not having a good experience. But if you're able to kind of get past that, or like I said, watch it on a smaller screen where that sort of just motion is a little bit more contained rather than surrounding your entire field of view, all of a sudden that becomes less of an issue, and it does feel a lot more like the kind of handheld camera phone style footage that we have nowadays.
Do you have any favorite scenes or moments from the movie that stand out to you or have always stood out to you, or maybe with renewed viewings, like you look at it and are like, oh, I never really noticed this one before?
Oh, hold up. You're asking me a lot of questions here, James, without, but you're dancing around your actual feelings about the movie, because here I am saying about, oh, it's great for this reason and that reason, and I really enjoyed it, and it's one of my favorites of all time. You haven't told me what your thoughts are on it. I'm curious.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that it was clear through my dialogue and discourse. I really like this movie.
Oh, okay.
I've always been a fan of it. Yeah, I've always been a staunch defender of the Blair Witch Project, and I think it's an amazing movie that it deserves the accolades it has. It's one of the most profitable movies of all time, I think, because it was shot for, I believe, less than $50,000 and grossed like $250 million. Like, that's insane. And box office performance doesn't necessarily, you know, correlate with the quality of a movie, but I think this movie just did exactly what it wanted to do. That last scene is one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Still, last night I watched this movie, and when I see Mike standing in that corner, chills down my back, man. It still hits me hard.
Right? It's great, because, and I don't want to deviate too much from your question, but that last scene I love to talk about, because this whole time you're just kind of like suffocating in the woods, right? You're just so sick of seeing the woods just like these characters are, and you want some sort of change of scene, and you finally get it in that final scene, but it's like the most horrific place possible. So on one hand, it's like a relief to get to some other setting in this movie, but at the other hand, it's like this horrific, you know, derelict building hidden out in the woods, and you just know that bad stuff is going down there. And like you said, that last shot is so iconic and so unusual that, you know, it's simultaneously creepy, but also you don't exactly know what's going on. And it's that sort of cliffhanger and that sort of uncertainty that makes it such a strong way to end the movie. Because, you know, it was found footage. Of course, there's no like Hollywood ending or anything. It's just like, well, that's where the tape cut off.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you liked it, because the way that all your questions were set up were like, well, what did you think about the shaky cam? Well, what did you think about the obnoxious characters? It all felt like kind of like leading questions until your big reveal of, And that's all the reasons why I hate it. So I'm like, okay.
My preferred method of debating and discussing things is to know the arguments that your opponents are going to say and just address them right off the bat. So that's why I just wanted to talk about those common criticisms.
Fair enough.
Man, that ending, that house, which is, yeah, I think one of the scariest things. I was so sad to learn that that building got torn down because I would love, as creepy as it is, I would love to visit it sometime. And now I'll never have that opportunity.
Really? They tore it down? How recently? I had no idea.
Within the past decade, I believe it was torn down.
That is such a bummer. I'm so sad about that.
I am so sorry.
Your whole thing on YouTube is making theories, or at least discussing theories. And I think Blair Witch actually lends itself to a lot of theories, because I was just looking online about the different theories as to what happened in that final scene when Heather finds Mike standing in the corner. And a lot of people discuss whether the Blair Witch was involved at all, whether Mike and Josh were involved at all. Do you have any theories as to what actually happened? Especially because when they're talking to the townspeople in the beginning of the movie, you get so many different stories and sometimes almost conflicting information, and you're like, what's this about this Mr. Parr guy who killed these kids?
What he did is he took the kids down in the basement by twos, and he made one face into the corner.
Really?
And then he would kill the other one. And then when he's done with that, he grabbed the one out of the corner and killed that one too.
One of my favorite parts about it is you don't know what the entity is that you're dealing with, right? For exactly that reason, you get so many different stories and no one exactly agrees with itself. And so who knows? Is there something? Is there not something? It's great to discuss.
Would that be a full of shit statement?
No, I didn't.
Would that be a full of shit statement?
I actually did a theory a couple years ago on Blair Witch.
Oops.
Yeah, no, you're totally fine. But basically my original theory was that Mike and Josh were actually in it together to kill off Heather. And that basically everything that was happening around the Blair Witch was actually being set up by them to eventually scare her and traumatize her into that house where they can finally kind of like do the deed and then disappear off. And there's a decent amount of evidence to show that, especially in that final scene, the movement of Mike and how he leads Heather through the house by saying, oh, I hear a noise up here, I hear Josh down here. It doesn't make a lot of sense for why he's doing those movements. It's as though he's kind of leading her to pre-planned areas. He says, I'm going upstairs, I'm going downstairs, as though he's calling out to someone else who might be in the building, like where they are in the moment for that other person to get ready. Mike also breaks his own characterization throughout the movie where, like you mentioned earlier in this call, he's scared to leave the tent when the noises first start happening, and he's afraid to go out there and deal with humans or the supernatural. And yet in that final scene, he's the first one out of the tent, leading Heather to this building.
Come on, I'm in the house.
Where did he suddenly get this courage from? It seems oddly planned. I think it's a fun thing to speculate about. It's something that kind of just adds to the air of mystery that this movie has. Do I think it's what was intended? No, not necessarily. But I do think that there's a solid enough and interesting enough case to kind of support that those guys might have been concocting this whole thing.
I like that. It's dark as all hell, but I like it. I will definitely check that video out, and so should everyone watching this. I'm sure there's a bubble somewhere on screen that you can click and go watch that.
Well, shucks, thank you.
As we wrap up here, I do want to ask, were there any favorite scenes or moments in the movie that have just stuck with you?
Obviously, the final scene is just incredible. I love it. It's so tense, it's so dramatic, and the cliffhanger that it leaves you on is incredible. I think it frustrated a lot of people, but I just love when Mike reveals that he's the one who kicked the map into the river. Like, this whole time, they're at each other's throats, they're talking about the map and the compass and this and that, and then just Mike losing it and mimicking him kicking it into the river. It makes me laugh every time.
It was useless. I kicked that fucker into the creek.
It's not supposed to be a comedic moment, but the movie is so tense for such a long duration that just seeing this one guy lose his mind and admit to just, I got sick of it. I just threw the map in the river. Screw you guys.
I'm surprised how much this movie makes me laugh. Like the two fishing guys in the beginning that they're talking to, those guys are like bickering like they're an old married couple. It's great. I love it.
Oh, you're full of it.
Even like some of the townspeople in the early parts, there's the mother holding the kid, and I don't know if the kid was acting or what, but like the kid like trying to push the mother's mouth away and like trying to get her to be quiet and saying like, no.
No.
And they disappeared off the face of the earth.
No.
Really?
Okay, it's all right, Ingrid. I'm just telling a scary story, but it's not true.
I don't know if that was planned. I don't know if that was...
How'd they do that? Yeah.
It's one of those subtle things that I'm like, that worked out so perfectly, and I can't tell if that was intentional or if it wasn't.
And that just lends more to the like, wow, I get why people thought this was real.
Special shout out to all of her faux documentary footage of her, you know, in the cemetery, in the beginning, you know. I love just how cheesy and bad it is. It's so bad.
Yeah,
it's
that
so
voice
cringe.
she puts on is so funny.
It's great.
No more than 20 families laid their roots here over 200 years ago. Many of whom remain, either on this hill or in the town below.
It's so cringe. It's amazing.
So I asked you to put together 3 trivia questions about your favorite movie for me to answer. And I didn't do any supplementary research ahead of time. I didn't look at the IMDb trivia page.
Okay.
So hopefully I'll just know the answers just based on the horror movie knowledge I've absorbed over the years.
No, of course. And I mean, you do have a robust head full of all sorts of horror movie knowledge.
It's a big head.
So during the audition process, you know, the directors obviously knew that this was going to be a very improv heavy movie. So what question were they known to have asked all the actors who attended their audition?
Oh, wow. I don't know for sure, so I'm just going to have to guess at if you were stranded on a desert island, what would you take with you?
Ooh, close. Not at all. No, I mean, it's really hard. So this one is actually, you're a prisoner who served 7 years of a 9-year sentence. Why should we grant you parole?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, apparently that was why Heather was cast. That was the thing that got her the role. Meanwhile, Josh got cast purely because of his ability to use a camera. That's what he's gone on record to say, yeah.
Yeah, because he had to do both the entire movie.
Okay, so that was a bit hard. I feel like that was unfair. So let's go back to actually the content of the movie. How many endings are there for Blair Witch?
Oh, man. There's at least 3. Are we including the theatrical one?
Yes.
With Mike in the corner
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say 4 because I know that I've watched through them on the Blu-ray, and I'm glad they picked the one that they did because I think that the others were either not enough or did too much. I think there's one with someone on the ceiling or something, and I think the one they went with was just the perfect amount of creepiness. But how many were there?
4. There were 4. Good job, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically variations of Mike in the corners. Mike back turned, Mike facing her when she comes down, Mike hanging there, and then, like you said, Mike on the ceiling. So very subtle differences. It was in response to the early test audiences being confused, leaving the movie theater confused. So they went out and filmed a couple other ones, but exactly to your point, they absolutely went with the right one because there's something about just seeing a body turned into the corner that is so unsettling and so mysterious, and then to end it immediately afterward, that's all you need. It's great. All right, question number 3. And this one, actually, we've kind of alluded to it, but I'm looking for a bit more specifics here. What were some of the filming techniques the production team used to kind of get the most authentic experiences out of their actors for the movie?
Okay, I think the actors were actually camping overnight in the woods during, I think it took them like a week to shoot this maybe, and I'm pretty sure that overnight in the tents, the production crew would actually come out and do that. They would like shake the tents.
Go, fucking go!
They were basically doing all these things without giving the actors a heads up so that it would actually legitimately creep out the actors, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So to what you said, the actors were out there on their own basically filming themselves. The production team was only really communicating to them via walkie-talkie, and they were on this 8-day long camping trip where where the production team was giving them less food day by day, so that way they would start getting more stressed. They would attack them or leave things overnight that would, you know, surprise them in the morning and give them stuff to feed off of. Each person was kind of given different motivations that the other characters didn't necessarily know what was gonna happen. And then the last thing is they didn't even know where they were supposed to head on a day-to-day basis. They were given clues, and basically they were on kind of this scavenger hunt through the woods where at the end of the day they would find kind of their like camping location / like supplies kind of hidden inside of like a film reel tin.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, right?
Oh, that's so good. It's so effective.
Yeah. Bonus question for you, since you mentioned the rustling of the tent. Do you know what actually was rustling the tent?
Hands?
Yeah. I mean, it was a guy from the production, but there was something special about him.
No, I have no idea.
Okay, so this is another fun fact. he was dressed all in white, like white stockings, white shirt, kind of like a white knit thing over his head. And as they were doing the camera and leaving the tent, it was supposed to pan over to him as they were exiting the tent. So that way you just saw this kind of like white blurry vision of what was supposed to be the witch. But during the production, they actually forgot to capture that moment, and they never went back to refilm it. And so as a result, the Blair Witch never appears on camera.
I'm glad that she does.
Right?
I prefer that.
I think so too. I feel like that's one of those happy little accidents where if they had actually shown her or just a figure that represents her, that takes away a lot of the scariness. And again, like in this day and age of horror movies where everyone is so eager to show you their monster design or reveal to you how cool their like CGI budget was, the idea of not seeing the Blair Witch and not knowing what's actually doing all this is so much more effective because what you don't see is scarier than what you do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for hopping on this call and discussing the Blair Witch Project with me, man.
Well, thanks for calling me up and saying, hey, let's talk about movies, because like I said, not a lot of human contact these days, so having people to talk to and share stuff with is great. It would be nice to do this sort of stuff in person, but, you know, video calls work just as well.
We'll do something in person when we can.
Right.
In the meantime, I hope you and your whole family are safe and healthy and staying occupied.
Oh, we are doing our best to keep busy. I will say having a 20-month-old is a little bit challenging. He definitely misses the park, but, you know, he's also easily entertained with a box full of, you know, rice. So we're finding a balance of activities over here.
Yeah, I'll send you some rice.
Yes, please, thank you.
No problem, man. All right, we'll have more of these soon, but thanks a lot to Matt, and thanks a lot to everyone for watching. All right, everybody, be good people.